Okay, okay. And we're live. Hi, folks. Welcome to Sloan Science Fiction Station. We're live at the Doghouse, our little station. It's 9 o'clock GMT here in the UK, +1, sorry. We just thought we'd pop on and do our usual little chat about all things science fiction, etc. And today we put in for our topic today a few things about Dune that we've noticed just here and there in the news and on the Twitter sphere, etc., that kind of thing. And I thought we'd have a wee chat about them, and as usual, take any of your questions or comments, etc., etc. And we were running the Dune Book Club last night, and we had chapter 21, so we got through it. But unfortunately, we didn't really take that sort of. We usually have a wee bit of a chat about it afterwards, so I do apologise about that. That was just simply my throat, which is not in great shape at the minute. So, excuse me, apologies for that. And normally we like to take a wee bit more time and look at things like that, especially with important chapters. But hopefully we'll be back with that on Sunday. Because my throat is in such bad condition, we're just going to do 1 hour tonight. So we'll sign off at 10 o'clock. And it's been an interesting day here today. Always like to comment on the weather, but it's just been such a beautiful day, intermingled with sleet and hail and snow. So it's been shifting between absolutely gorgeous sunshine and blue skies, and really lovely spring vibe about the place today in Ireland. And as usual, just these little intermittent kind of snow showers, which has been kind of just felt a bit off kilter, a bit weird, if you like. So just to get us going, I suppose, in terms of I'm still working away at the Demolished Man at the minute, and I think I've decided that I'm going to do a video on the Demolished Man. I think it's worthy of paying attention to. So today we have a few things on the Dune radar for Dune fans. Excuse me. And I thought I'd just point out a few things and see if they're of interest to you. And obviously, I suppose, always from my point of view, what do you think of it? There's Brad saying, "Morning, Doc." Morning, Brad. How's it going? Hope you're keeping well. Yeah, thanks for joining us, my friend. So just in terms of a few things with getting going today, I spotted a video on YouTube, and I just thought, well, a lot of us here are Dune fans, whether we're old fans or new fans. And the video, I suppose, let me just see if I can bring it up, is by a chap called Ellis J. Farrow. And let me just have a wee quick nip over to YouTube if I can find the name of it. There we go. It was the name of the video was Dune versus Lord of the Rings. Why did Tolkien dislike Dune? Frank Herbert and J.R.R. Tolkien. And the site is Ellis J. Farrow's site on YouTube. And I have to say, I had a wee look at his video, and I was quite impressed by it. I liked it. But the most important thing, I suppose, and I'm not a Tolkien scholar in any way, though I know a couple of Tolkien scholars. I suppose was the reveal of that there's a letter, some correspondence by J.R.R. Tolkien in relation to Dune, and it's very much private correspondence. So Ellis, on his video, presents the correspondence there and has a wee bit of speculation about it. So I thought I would just sort of point it out if anybody wants to pop over to his channel and check it out. There's a couple of letters by basically about J.R.R. Tolkien being sent copies of Dune, questioning what he thought of it, this kind of thing. And they're very, very sort of polite letters. And I thought they were quite interesting. One sort of from a professional point of view of how Tolkien doesn't really want to diss another author. But also the fact, I suppose, really is that we get that J.R.R. Tolkien, the phrase is dislike Dune intensely. And this is what was fresh to me. So Ellis's video, I think, is from 2021, and I believe that this correspondence is reasonably new. So if anybody wants to check it out and pop over and have a wee look at his video, it's quite good. Basically, Ellis runs with the idea of, well, I suppose the point is that Tolkien doesn't explain this, and it's a private point of view. He really disliked the book Dune intensely. A private point of view that he didn't want to express publicly and didn't. And I think it's just a very interesting comment. Dune and The Lord of the Rings have a lot in common. in relation to, I suppose, the positions that they occupy within fantasy and science fiction literature. They have quite a bit in common in relation to what their sons have done with those properties as well, and I suppose that how their sons' respective works are viewed too. So I just Ellis has put together a little bit of a speculation. He's simply thought, why did Tolkien dislike Dune intensely? Because it's a good question to ask, and has a little bit of speculation on it. And I thought some of his thoughts on it were pretty bang on. Excuse me. And they're very different animals, but yeah, it's an intriguing little thing. So if anybody's not aware of this correspondence and you want to see what Ellis thinks about his speculations on why Tolkien disliked Dune intensely, they'd line up with some stuff that we've talked about here before, you know. And there's Babs saying, "Evening Doc," and Brad saying, "Was it much to do with J.R. Tolkien's faith?" And Brad said, "Hey, Babs, I'm morning, Brad." So yeah, thanks for joining us, Babs. There's a number of factors there. Yes, indeed. Tolkien's faith is one of them. I would sort of add his conservatism, I suppose, is another. And I suppose Tolkien's very famous for disliking a particular style of literature. In particular, is that, or an approach to literature, is that Tolkien dislikes allegory intensely. We're using that word again, but as well, that's something we've known about him for quite some time, that he's not a fan of allegory at all. And that's really in relation to people commenting on Lord of the Rings as an allegory for World Wars I and II. So it's one of those things where, of course, if I think that that's probably a good path to look at, because Dune is allegory and loves it and laps it up and uses it an awful lot. Even to the point where we have Frank on record of discussing, you know, I suppose to the point was the famous quote about Chom, isn't it? That Chom is OPEC, and there's no doubt about it, you know. So there we go. So it's Babs, if you're just joining us and you missed what we were having a wee chat about, it was a bit of speculation to do with a video that's on YouTube by you'll find it on Ellis J. Farrow's channel. And very quickly, the title of the video was Dune versus Lord of the Rings. Why did Tolkien dislike Dune? And as I said, it has an interesting just a little bit of correspondence with J.R. Tolkien that mentions Dune. And so, if we're for all Dune fans, I was quite interested about it, and I hadn't heard of this. So it was nice to sort of have a look at the actual source material, which is there on the video, the actual letters themselves. And B, yeah, it certainly does open things up to, oh, okay, you know, and I think it's kind of also shows a wee bit of old-fashioned sensibilities. We have an author who, and this is a very private, this is a private letter, it's a private admission, it's not public in any way. So we really do have an author sort of trying to be respectful to another author, even though he doesn't like the work, he doesn't want to say so publicly, he doesn't want to comment, you know. But I think in relation to it, it's basically Tolkien got sent a copy of Dune by someone involved in the publication of it, and asked what he thought. And I think the response, I think basically then they got sent another copy of Dune. So quite nicely, I suppose, it ends with Tolkien wondering what should he do with the extra copy of Dune. Should he return it, or should he pass it on to someone? You know. So just an interesting wee thing in terms of Tolkien Dune lore, and it does make sense, I suppose, in some ways. But of course, we'll never get the full, I suppose, the full SP on what Tolkien, you know, any details of what Tolkien thought. And I suppose again, it sort of shows him to be a bit more of a gentleman about these kind of things, and perhaps you would get with modern writers, you know. Morning, Bum says, I'm sure JRR's faith wasn't much happy about the Bene Gesserit sisterhood. Yeah, there is something incredibly conservative about the Lord of the Rings. And again, I find it much less so with the Hobbit. I find the Hobbit a very different animal. I really do. I find it quite a gentle book, I suppose. But it has all the adventure and the danger. But there is something about it that's all about comfort and home and keeping things just the way they are. Sometimes I think Tolkien. I think Tolkien isn't an. I don't think Tolkien would be what you would call an environmentalist. I think he just wants to preserve things in a certain way, I suppose. But I've a colleague at the University of Ulster who did all sorts of stuff on Tolkien and looking at it, particularly in the environmental way, actually. But I've lost touch there, which is a pity because we could actually. That would be an interesting one. We could have him as a guest on the show, couldn't we? I'll maybe see if we can track him down and have a chat at some point. I always find Tolkien's dislike for allegory a bit confusing. I did too. I suppose the problem with Tolkien is that as much as we look at him as an Oxford Don, don't we? So we consider him an authority on things. That's a mistake. First of all, and it's the same with all sorts of people who come out of the Oxbridge kind of area. Not everyone that comes out of there is tip top, if you see what I mean. To take a whole a branch of style of literature and go, that's crap, I don't like it. Fair enough, that's Tolkien's opinion. Allegory works very well, I think, and I would argue some of our oldest forms of literature are allegory, and certainly to a degree I would argue that fables certainly work that way. And I'm a big fan of fables, if you like that. Fables pretty much to do with all things human, really, but intend to involve animals, really. So it's hard for them not to be allegorical. But it's a bit like when we're dismissive. I mean, somebody was chatting to me the other day about saying, I'm not going to watch the, is it the Silmarillion? I don't think it is the Silmarillion, but the new Amazon Lord of the Rings show, whatever it happens to be. Let's have a wee look. I'm not particularly clued up on it as of the minute. What is it? The Rings of Power, is that it? Dear, oh dear. Debunking the backlash against non-white actors. And oh, goodness, right. So that's all over the news, isn't it? So the Rings of Power, this sort of, I don't know. Somebody was just basically saying, oh, I'm going to boycott it. I think it's going to be rubbish. And just from a professional point of view, I was kind of not that we all have our opinions, etc. But I like to give things a chance, I suppose. And when we run up absolutes or big barriers for ourselves in looking at the things that we like, we tend to lose out, I think. So say I don't like allegory, I'm not going to read an allegory. Fair enough, but that's your loss. If you see what I mean, I think it's a shame. We talked about the comment recently from a science fiction author who doesn't want to read books by people who've committed suicide. And granted, they've written their books before they die, but it's such an absurd statement to make. And if you actually line up all the books, if you want to go well into history and line up books by people who've committed suicide and go, I refuse to read this body of literature, you have, oh goodness, it's a bit like being, actually makes me think of The Demolished Man. To be honest with you, sorry to bring that back to science fiction, but what it means to be demolished in the end is to have things removed from your universe, if you like, that you have no way of conceiving of them. How you demolish a person is you strip out each sort of, I don't know, abstract or real concept within a universe and remove it from their ability to think of it. So you go, I'm taking away your ability to think of geography. I'm taking your ability away to think of music, and all those things are gone from you. It's sad, I think, and it's everyone's got their opinions, don't they? It's okay to dislike things. It's seldom wise to jump everything into the same category. Even with things like genre fiction and stuff, where we like to categorize things. Excuse me. And Lord of the Rings is an old, it's an English conservative book written by an English conservative professor who's a product of empire and lives at the heart of the British Empire. It's odd. I often wonder. I think it's very interesting how, we'll say, language and literature in the United Kingdom is often called English language and English literature, and I'm sure that's probably the same around. But if you actually start looking at the books and by the people who you're studying, you go, oh, hang on, that guy's an Irish guy. that guy's an American, etc., etc. And there is a very sort of, I don't know, I see a lot of things in Tolkien's work, but it's stuff that I see in a lot of English writers, really from, well, I would say probably from Empire onwards, but particularly the Fin de Sequel onwards, I think. To be demolished sounds very much like depression. I don't want to go, I'll not go into it too much, cannibals, because colleges and cannibals, but I would spoil the book a wee bit. I suppose just like Tiger, whenever we're trying to put together, whenever we're trying to promote, and because not for any other reason than we think it deserves to be read and appreciated. This is another look at this. I'm absolutely disgusted. Just to let you know, by the way, here we go. We talked about science fiction masterworks. Okay, and I've argued that Gully Foyle is one of the most famous characters. He's a legendary character in science fiction to those who know him. And the other character in this is also and I wanted to do a video because I want to argue that the main protagonist, if you like, he's once again not a hero. In fact, our main guy in this is the villain, the murderer. I would like to make an argument that he's an archetype for a particular type of corporate villain, if you like. But unfortunately, in my book, and I'm reading the back of it, the character's name's wrong. Dear, oh dear. And I'm just getting a bit. We've talked about all the misprints in my. Goodness gracious, are you the same publisher? No, you're not. Thank goodness for that. This is Golance, which is an imprint of the Orion Publishing. So the character's called Ben Reichs, plural, on the back of this book, and his name is Ben Reich. Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, you've heard me go on about the Tiger. This one, and I just recently I started reading this and hadn't got a chance to get through it just with events in life. This is another book that plays with language heavily, typography. It's a brilliant book. But yeah, being demolished is kind of interesting. The whole thing's interesting. It's the premise is not giving anything away, but trying to talk about books like this without revealing, just to hook the reader in and off and go on, read it. It's brilliant. But I'm not going to tell you too much. It's going to be tricky with that one. I'm trying to wonder how to go about it, But yeah, I suppose it's what the cops. It's a psychic thing, I suppose. If you get the Alfred Bester reference in Babylon 5 and the Psy-Cops, etc., and all that stuff, then that's really this book that's coming from here, The Demolished Man. And would go well with certain types of books, I suppose. Minority Report would fit well with this, I think. So looking forward to having a wee look at it. But yeah, it's when allegory's fine. There's no problem with it at all. I have no bother with it, and it just depends on what you want to do. Tolkien's trying to create a myth for the English, basically, and I think that's a bit of a weird one for me, but because they have them, if you like. But the myths that are coming out that are in England, if you like, are a combination of I suppose they're Anglo-Saxon, Germanic. There's the Celtic myths. They're all sort of hybrids, if you like. And England's sort of great myth is King Arthur, but he's actually a king that's associated with England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and all four of those countries make a claim to him, which is quite interesting, actually. The name Arthur is Irish, pretty much, but then there's similar names that are we've got MacArthur. All of these names are Irish, old Irish names. They're actually Crooney names, I believe. Oh, bear with me a second, folks. But there you go. You were talking about the removal of particular capacities. I was thinking that particularly of anhedonia, the inability to feel joy, which I associate with depression. Anhedonia. From yes, very good Greek word. That's an interesting. There's lots of interesting things like that. Depression. I suppose whenever you're depressed, it depends on the level of depression. I get down a bit myself. I would call it melancholic for me. I don't go too far, and I like to hit bottom before I can pop up again, if you like. But it's Anhedonia. It's an interesting term for it. Anhedonia. Inability to feel pleasure. It's a common symptom of depression as well as other mental. Yeah. Um, it's within that, I suppose, within the demolished mankind, there's a physical deconstruction, a demolishment, if you like, and a mental one as well. So yeah, the ultimate goal of being demolished is to is not pleasant. It's a punishment, if you like. So I was thinking particularly about Hedonia, but yeah, it's interesting enough. I've been looking forward to getting back to that part in the book. And it's one of the things that, as much as Alfred Bester has produced other books, Colleges and Cannibals, there's something about this book and Tiger that go very well hand in hand, and that we're almost they're both as much as Dune, etc., is heavily influenced by Carl Gustav Jung and the various ideas from his schools of psychoanalysis and psychology, etc. Bester's the other way. He's Freud, and I suppose with particularly this one, particularly with the Demolished Man, it's quite Freudian. And whereas we have Gully Foyle, who's a nothing, kind of going to the, this guy is the highest, and he's going to go like that. It's interesting that, and if you think about the influence on it's one of the ones that we didn't put into the Tiger videos. But simply put, we had too many people. I had too many science fiction writers to quote from, who were going, "This is my favorite. This is the granddaddy. This is the best. Oh, I love this." But one of them is Michael Moorcock. So particularly two authors of note that I thought that were of interest that said that Tiger was their favorite. One was Michael Moorcock, and the other was William Gibson. So we put the William Gibson quote in, and we mentioned Moorcock a fair bit anyway, so we thought it would just be better to go with that because of the relationship with cyberpunk. But there's a character in Tiger that's almost a physical model for Elric. And if you understand what Elric is, in terms of how these two characters work in Tiger and Demolished Man, and we know that that these books are a bit of an influence on Michael Moorcock, then the idea within Elric is the inversion of Conan, if you know what I mean. Sorry, that Conan is I suppose we go into that Nietzschean idea. He's the person who's a nobody, a slave, rises by his own hand and might to be king. And Elric is again meant to be an antithesis of Conan. We're going to have to look at Elric at some point, aren't we? We end up talking about him far too much. I think he's a very important character. He also represents the downfall of the British Empire and the stagnancy that the British Empire is in, if you like, and to do with how empires fall. But there's a lot of that, but especially how Elric is an all-powerful emperor, if you like, who goes to being just this wandering swordsman and who is so physically weak, if you excuse me, that he's a drug addict, that he requires drugs just to stay alive. So it's interesting. It is there's so much when I talk about the influence that Tiger has. I said in the video that it was jaw dropping, and I said from me coming back to the book, and the further down the road you get, the more science fiction you read, the more science fiction you see on TV and listen to on the radio, etc. The influences of Tiger are everywhere, but I'm going to have to throw in that there's a fair amount of the Demolished Man out there too, and they would make incredible movies, I think. Speaking of names, Colleges and Cannibals saying, speaking of names, I enjoyed hearing George R.R. Martin speak about how he sorted his characters' names in Ice and Fire, layered by invasions, as in the British Isles. Yeah. There's a bunch of names in that I would recognize, I suppose. See, I always go with the Circe's the one. I'm kind of, because we do have a kind of Irish kind of thing, Circe, like that. But we also have Kirke, and if it's spelt as in the Greek character, the Greek mythological character. And that's one of the ones that I hear pronounced differently all the time. Some people it's Kirke, some people it's Kirce, some people it's Circe, and some people it's Circe. But I always go with K's if I'm not too sure with the Greeks. with the Greek language, so I go with Kirky. Finished the three-body problem. Fun, sci-fi, heavy on the science fiction. I'm going to have to. I have it sitting. I think I have it here somewhere. I've been bringing up as much science fiction as I can. I'm getting another bookshelf stocked down here. We're going to try and turn the station into a bit more sci-fi heavy, if you like. And we're about to have a wee bit of a swap around with because we have a new doggy in the doghouse. We're going to do a wee bit of a change of furniture, and we're getting another bookcase in here. So the idea, hopefully, that we'll have as much sci-fi books, articles, and paraphernalia. I actually have something by Michael Moorcock, by the way, guys, that I'm wanting to read, and you've just reminded me about it. But Bojack, the three-bodied problem, certainly in terms of people raving about a modern science fiction novel, I'm dying to get to it. I'm really looking forward to it. It's just, doing this science fiction station thing has just got me very busy with my reading, unfortunately. And especially I'm even scribbling down recommendations from people and wondering when I'm going to get to them. So I kind of grab what I can where I can. And I had a few minutes the other night, desperate to read that Robert Heinlein short story. So short stories are great. But yes, I'm really looking forward to it. Fun, science fiction, good. Heavy on the side, no bother. I like stuff like that, and I'm really looking forward to it, I have to say. Have you finished the first book or all three, Bojack? I'm just curious because it is a trilogy, isn't it? I have to say. Now, I'm looking for something here. Bear with me a wee second. If I can find it. Where did you go? Probably in my drawer. There it is. So there we go. Yeah, Xixin Liu. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Xixin Liu. I always do my best with pronunciations, but I can be quite culturally ignorant, you know. In terms of modern science fiction writers, going Ping, he's the one that's been on my radar, along with Anne Leckie, I suppose. And I'm trying, new science fiction writers. There's a couple that I've started to get into that I'd like to give a chance. I read China Miéville's The City and the City, which has been turned into a mini-series on the BBC. And if anybody hasn't seen it or read the book, I'd highly recommend that. It kind of resonated a lot with me. So I suppose it's that if you've ever lived in a city that's been divided or a country that's been split, I thought it was very good. Resonated. I sort of thought a lot of the Catholics and the Protestants over here in Northern Ireland. But again, that same sort of idea of maybe being a Berliner during the Cold War, with East and West Berlin, and a very interesting sci-fi kind of. I think he's called weird fiction, isn't he? But I thought it was a sci-fi book, pretty much, and I enjoyed it. So, but I understand he's got quite a few books out there. Excuse me. Halfway through the second, I'd love to know how they are. What you think of them once you're finished, Bojack. The truth be told, if I do hit them, I'll probably hit all three of them at once and try to tear through them. But I've got the first one. Yeah, I mean it's award-winning, much acclaimed, etc., etc. Not always a guarantee, but yeah, the book itself has been, I think the story's has been carrying well for the few years it's been out. China gets wonderfully weird and cracking. I'd put into the Tiger video. There's a there's a Tiger video. Sorry, Bojack. There's a Tiger reference in the last book, apparently, in the three-bodied problem. If you want to check it out, you can see if you can find it for me. And that's another book that's apparently that Tiger has influenced as well. There we go. So, excuse me. Very bad throat. I've smoked one cigarette today, which is pretty good. I haven't wanted to smoke at all. Sort out the old throat. So, very interestingly, tonight, just by the way, guys, in terms of Dune, we were talking about those letters from Tolkien. I just wanted to point something else out there. Just on Twitter. I think her name is Jen Schoenherr, but this would be John Schoenherr's daughter, just posting up a wee image from, I think it was one of the Dune covers, to say it's the 12th anniversary of the passing of John Schoenherr. And I've mentioned him a few times in my videos. And if you actually look at the very first Dune video that we have, of course, it's got John Schoenherr's art on it. So it was just to say that to mark that anniversary, he's the artist who is arguably given us the best vision, I think, of Dune. And in terms of Frank Herbert, his preferred artist. So I don't know if anybody's familiar too much with science fiction, fantasy art. It's a great field all in itself, but he's a fantastic artist. And so it's just a wee anniversary of note today, sadly, that this marks the 12th anniversary of his passing. So yeah, John Schoenherr, July 5th, 1935, passed on the April 8th, 2010. And I just thought I would show you this. You may well know that I'm writing all over, which I'm please don't buy this book. It's full of mistakes and misprints these editions. Appalling. So I write all over Dune books, but there's one that I don't write on. And there's one that I look after very and I have actually read, if you see what I mean. It's not a thing to be maintained on a shelf. And of course, we probably all know this as, there we go, the greatest science fiction book of all time edition, as it tells you. Art on the cover, of course, John Schoenherr. But I'll just take the dust cover off here to make this a bit easier. I think, isn't there books editions with the Litany Against Fear on it at the minute? And of course, that's not the Litany Against Fear. So this is the one with the John Schoenherr original artwork in beautiful plates in this book. And just to sort of commemorate the man and all the wonderful Dune art that he's done, and among many other things. Here we go. I just thought I'd show you a few of these. Hopefully, if it's not too. So this is the copy that I have. There we are. And really, this is, as much as there are TV and film adaptations of Dune and its characters, etc., etc., this has always been how I've looked at it. And to me, that's the Baron. That's what the Baron looks like. And I think, what a great picture. And such an iconic picture, I think, of the Baron. Beautiful piece of art. Really brings... my understanding is that Herbert and John Schoenherr hadn't really met at the point of seeing these illustrations. But there we go, the Sardaukar and a Thopter in the background. But they were absolutely how, my understanding is how Frank Herbert envisaged his story, his characters. And of course, he's illustrated Dune on the original publication within the analog magazines. And we have the black and white illustrations there as well, which are phenomenal. So I have featured these on my videos, usually as title cards. No better way to kind of show certain things, and particularly certain scenes within Dune. And it's just, if anybody's not aware of him, and I don't know if you can get any wee art books, but this really is the Dune that I imagined as I read it. And you know something, as much as I pointed out, I've seen the David Lynch version at this point when I started reading Dune. It still didn't occupy my mind the way these pictures and the illustrations, etc., did. Especially because I thought of the limitations of the medium of cinema, and an artist with a good imagination has no limitations, really. That's Sietch Tavar. There's not. I'll not be at this all day, folks, but just they are worth real. And of course, there you go. Paul with his worm hooks and his first sandworm. The key, and there we go. That image of Stilgar. Sorry to get the light reflecting, and all the Fremen just in behind him, if you could notice them. His artwork is wonderful, and I suppose it's the. I mean, there we go. There's that messianic thing. With Paul and the Fremen and their sandworm tooth knives, etc. It's the particular choice of scenes, I think, that he went with. And of course the defeat of the Sardaukar. There we go, has been my title card. What just a fantastic picture for scale. Here's these mighty Sardaukar territories like ants, like myrmidons getting squished. And so that's I just thought, just to commemorate the gentleman's passing, what in terms of Dune lore, the Dune universe And I'm sure it's had many artists by now. And the original covers, John Schoenherr, and I'll just grab these down for a wee second here to show you. Oh, Colleges and Cannibals saying I could not finish the first three body. Is that 3-body problem? 3BO Bojack could not latch onto any of the characters. 3BP, yeah, 3-body problem. Bojack, only good character is the cop, but still worth the read. Characters definitely the weakest point of a book. If your characters are weak, it's not a good indicator. As much as you may get praise, so I'll certainly definitely have to look at it. But when we read science fiction, a lot of the time the ideas are the thing. Some of our authors know how to really write well and how to really write good characters. It's one of the things that I often find a bit weird about when people talk about the characterization in Dune. They think it's weak. I totally disagree. I think there's an enormous amount of effort put into it, and it works really well. But the characters are also, in many ways, archetypes, I suppose. So there we go, John Schoenherr. I'm sure I think I had a wee look at him on Wikipedia, etc. And a very, very talented artist. But to me, I mean, we were also talking about trying to get a hold of, for me, one set of paperbacks, particularly when I was doing the PhD on Dune, with the same covers, the same publishing house, and I still don't own a set. And I think I've got lots of different. I've got 4 of one and 3 of this, and I've even got 5 out of 6 of one set, but I don't have 6. And these ones have been brought out. This is the 50th anniversary edition that they've republished here. Stuck a sticker on it, and we're talking. They've even got characters' names wrong in this. So I had considered buying all of these to have a one set, but I won't be doing so. Probably just look around for another. I used to always just buy Dune in a second-hand bookshops. To me, it used to be a sign of the quality of your charity shop or second-hand bookshop if you had a set of Dune books in there, because it seemed to be that most of them did, But there we go. Yeah. So, pardon me. So that was just one of those we points in passing. Actually, I'd quite like to do a wee program on some of the prominent science fiction and fantasy artists, but there's actually quite an awful lot of them. But certainly John Schoenherr, I've always thought was a great talent. In fact, there's some artists out there that are purely science fiction, fantasy. These kind of artists going back a while, and I love their work. I absolutely adore it. As well worth having a wee look at. I think a lot of science fiction, fantasy, horror art of a certain period gets a bit lurid. If you see what I mean, the magazine covers and all of this with the women in space helmet. I always thought the idea of a woman wearing a space helmet with a bikini was just the most absurd thing ever, But there we go. Collins and Campbellson, yes, he was interested in Bojack, but none of them could carry the contents. The book just read like an exposition, and from what I've heard, what follows is not worth a trilogy. That said, I'm not a fan of trilogies, but enjoys books in the same set in the same universe. The one thing that will put me off a set of books quicker, if you're going to recommend something to me, the one thing that will put me off quicker is that you tell me it's a 6 or 7 or a 5, or if we go past 3, I'm a bit wary of trilogies. And I think colleges, I'd said that the book that killed fantasy for me was, I think it was called Rise of a Merchant Prince, by Raymond E. Feist, and we'd had the what was it, Magician, Silverthorn and Darkness at Sathanim. We had that trilogy, and then we had another trilogy, and we suddenly were into a trilogy of trilogies. And do you know something? I was just chatting about this with my wife the other day. That isn't it nice to have a happy ending? As we were talking about Star Wars, and how does Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy, how does it end? And if you think about Once Upon a Time in a Galaxy, what is it? Sorry, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, isn't it? And that's Star Wars' way of saying once upon a time, I think. And just what's been done to Star Wars, I think it's just a series about perpetual war now, rather than at the end of Return of the Jedi, yeah, we've defeated evil, let's have a party and we can all live happily ever after. And I think we're not getting our happily ever afters anymore, I think. And sometimes it's just maybe an author's desire to milk something and make money out of it. And I don't know. There's not too many worlds that are sort of genuinely expanded beyond original novels that are worth it, I suppose. You know, I just love a story coming to an end and going, what is it we talk about in June? The attitude of the knife, cutting it and saying, that's it, it's done. You know, it's great to end a story and then go, now I can think about it and talk about it and wonder about it, and not, just something that's perpetually going on, Trying to get through the opening book in Peter F. Hamilton at the minute, but it really does burn the reader's patience with what almost amounts to sub-novels introducing characters but not advancing plot. Is that the Night's Dawn trilogy? Oh, Peter F. Hamilton trilogy, that is a salvation. I've talked about it, that, and I had read another book by him as a collection of stories. Was it Something of Eden or something? I think we had a wee look at it the other week. But I thought the last book in the Night's Dawn trilogy, I threw it across the room and was disgusted by it. And in a very, that's the worst, almost the worst, I think, Deus Ex Machina ever. And it's a pity because I thought the first book was excellent. I thought I don't know, your universes are great and well realized and believable until you start bringing the dead back to life. And once we're there, I think we're kind of finished, yeah, the Night's Dawn trilogy. God, and I read this ages ago. It would have been in the 90s, I think. Just has an appalling Deus Ex Machina, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think he was a relatively new writer at the time. I think he got lost in his own story. So we got the Reality Dysfunction, the Newtonian Alchemist, 96, 97, the Naked God, 99. And these were big books, they're chunky. The Reality Dysfunction I thought was excellent, by the way, don't get me wrong. Adamus and Edemus. It was an interesting universe. The Naked God, is that the one where he, let me just see. Yeah, here we go. Just not to spoil anything, but this is on Wikipedia. It just says at the conclusion of this book. Oh, hang on, the other book. Hang on. The person learned over 1,000 years ago that Tarathka Ark ship encountered a spaceborne entity known as the Sleeping God, which exhibited enormous powers which may be of use against the possessed. Before this information could be passed on to anyone. Blah, blah, blah. Counterattack by Captain Coventry crew. They were right back at Tranquility. They find the habitat missing, presumed possessed, taken out of the universe. Isn't that it? It just moves. It moves. I think he just moves everything with his mind in the end, and that's it. We're done. I'm not remembering it exactly well, but it was just a what, So it's a bit like what we talked about the Deus Ex Machinas with Dune. If you're an author and you've been running a set of stories for quite some time, you're going to run into problems in how you resolve things. You need to keep things tidy. It's a good thing to write your last page first, I think. Sounds like level creep in video games. You save the city, now save the country, now the content, now the planet, now the universe. Yeah, then onto the multiverse, Brad. Yeah. Dear. Look, you got me thinking about something there a wee minute. Hang on, and I was going to talk about it. I'm just trying to think about it. What it was. Oh, it's totally left my head. Actually, it was something you would have been interested in. See if it'll creep back in. Yeah, it's. Oh, I remember what it was. George R.R. Martin. Somebody mentioned George R.R. Martin there, I think. Let's have a chat about him for a minute. Speaking of names, I enjoyed hearing George R.R. Martin speak about how he sorted his characters' names in Ice and Fire, laid bare invasions, as in the British Isles. It's the map, I think, is if you flip it, and I think the Irish are the people beyond the wall or something, aren't they? I think I can tell you how Game of Thrones was meant to end. If you like George R.R. Martin's ending, would you like to hear? And I'm just wondering. I think I got rid of all the books down the stairs. Actually, I have read them all up until now. The Horn, isn't it? Let me see. Ping. Bear with me a wee second. It's to do with plagiarism again, sadly. Now, let's have a wee look at the last book. No cover. Wonderful. Right. Thank you, Wikipedia. Bear with me a wee second. Yes. Images. Oh, no. Hang on. Where would you go? The Winds of Winter has a big horn on the cover. And I think George R.R. Martin's been ripping the guts out of Elric and quite a lot of stuff, to be honest with you. It's another one of those. There's a horn in the Stormbringer series. There you go. And I think it's the same horn. Now. In other words, for anybody who doesn't know how the Elric series ends, and I don't know if I want to do this or not, for anybody who doesn't want to know how the Elric series ends, hit mute for about 1 minute, please, or look away now or whatever. I'm about to explain it. And I think the horn is the same horn, and it's how. So basically, within the Elric series, Elric ends up at the end of the world with Stormbringer the sword, his friend Moonglum, and the Horn of Fate, as I believe it's called. It's been a long time since I've read these now, and I've just recently picked them up again I want to get through it there. And it doesn't really end there, so I'm not it's just this particular world, if you like. So of course these are multiverse characters where they're continually reincarnated. And the problem about that is Stormbringer kills everything. And it's a Stormbringer is a god imprisoned in a sword, and as far as I know, its sole purpose is to kill gods, or just basically anything. But that, if I'm remembering correctly, it's described as a hell sword, and it has a twin called Mournblade. So way back since I read this, guys, if I'm not getting it spot on, but basically the battle's fought, and the idea is that Elric's meant to blow this horn, and it's going to destroy the world around him and rebuild. It's like a rejuvenating thing, if you like, and bring in the world that we live into. The world that we live into existence as it happens, if you like. So the problem is that Elric and Moonglum are standing there at the end of the world, and he doesn't have, because he's so physically weak, this albino prince, he doesn't have the strength to blow the horn. So his mate Moonglum, this is where the real tragedy of Elric comes in, I suppose. A great ending. Says, use the sword, kill me. It'll suck my soul and give you enough strength, and you can blow the horn. And he does it, basically. And Moonglum's, no, everyone who ever gets killed by Stormbringer just goes, no, the horror. No, I never imagined, this kind of it's worse than death. It gives him the strength, and he blows the horn. And so Elric and Stormbringer are the last things surviving on his world of the Young Kingdoms, and everything starts changing around him. And at that point, the sword flips up on the air and runs him through. I think the ending of it, it's something like, farewell, my friend. I was 1,000 times more evil than you could possibly imagine. And the world becomes... So that's what the horn does. And of course, Elric pops up all over the place, and there isn't really an ending in that sense that the eternal champion is eternal. That's what happens at the end of Elric, and that horn, and there's enough. All of the Targaryens they're Melnibonians, and of course, it's an allegory for the corruption and stagnation of the royal families and the society of Britain, I think, as well. There's a lot to Michael Moorcock's Elric series, Stormbringer books. So there you go. That's just my own opinion. People take all of these elements from different stories, whether it be myth or other people's books or obscure books that they think people don't know about, and they put them in and repackage them pretty much. And that's all that the Song of Ice and Fire. I've enjoyed the writing. It's kind of quite adult, but it's highly derivative, and there's nothing else really to say. That it's incredibly derivative. And if you have a good knowledge of sci-fi and fantasy, you can go in there and find the references, But I hope that George R.R. Martin is a warning to people who own, writers everywhere who haven't finished telling their stories. And I think the warning is there: don't let the TV get your story until you finish it, because someone else has taken his story and finished it. It's left his hands. And to be an authority, to author something, is to be the definitive person involved in creating that world. He's handed his work over and let someone complete it, and he shouldn't have. But in terms of where I think it was going, I think it was going to go for a sort of doom and gloom kind of. Elric is based on sort of Scandinavian doom sagas. I love it that there's a category. The old Scandinavian doom saga. Yes, it's. I know them well, but there you go. So, yeah, and for anybody who hasn't read the Stormbringer books, we do have them about. We're bringing all sorts up here. We've tried to bring in, by the way, a chunk of just to show you. We've got a bunch of graphic novels and stuff over here. We've old 2000 AD. You've got some reference books. We're trying to get some DVDs brought up and stuff. And we've a whole chunk. We have a classics library up over here for a myth. And we've even got some. I love books, but we've even got some really weird little things that might be useful that are quite science fiction-y in some ways. We've got a whole bunch of these yearbooks of science in the future down here. All sorts of wonderful stuff, science fiction related. And I suppose it's mostly literature. And we do have, one wee thing, folks, just to show you. I was having a wee chat about it there. Let me see. And of course, sorry, we look. No. Because just in regards to John Schoenherr, just something that I didn't get to show you really. And of course, what this my copy has a couple of streaks that are damaged on it. These are little marks of I think that. But there you go. Again, this is Dune, the analog 1963 first edition. There you go. And two out of the three of these have a bit of work by John Schoenherr on them. But within these, and again, just in relation to Dune art, the definitive Dune artist, I would say. I mean, some of the black and white illustrations are fantastic. Look at that. There's Jessica and Mapes. Look at Mapes there. A fantastic sort of I'm sure a lot of these are online these days. And of course, the Baron's hands. Dune World. There we go. 1963. So it was just a quickly, because we were just mentioning the anniversary of his passing there. Very talented artist, and I think generally has helped his viewpoint of his ideas of how Dune should look. I think has shaped it for a lot of other artists and people involved with it. So there we go. Oh, Joshua, I love his stuff. Really good. I must sit and have a good chat about all see who we can. I must make a good list of them. Of some particularly good science fiction artists, etc. Due to Martin not focusing on writing and getting the book done, he's pretty bad, but he works on other things. I know, but it's if it's going to be your main body of work in your life, you're going for your magnum opus. If you like your great work, I would suggest get it finished. It's easy to get distracted, and we all do it. And it's I don't see him getting it done, to be honest. And he's oddly enough, that might not be a thing that's bad for book sales. I suppose it can leave people speculating. But Stormbringer was a novel's title itself. Yeah. Stormbringer, what was the first one, wasn't it? There we go. Here they all over. There we are. That was the Peter F. Hamilton book, that we were talking about. It was a second chance that that was quite good. I enjoyed that. Just that stories have decent endings. There we go. And of course, our Dune Encyclopedia. Now, that's not John Schoenherr, is it? That's Bruce Pennington, I think, on that cover, who's also a really good Dune artist, I think. I'd say those are the two. Let me see. Yeah, we've got... so, let me see. We have a whole bunch here. We've got the Sailors and the Seas of Fate. But I think Elric of Melnibone. There it is. No. What was the one that I didn't have that was the first book? Elric of Melnibone. I had it there. I don't know, but yeah, Stormbringer. For anybody who's interested in the Michael Moorcock ones, I had bunch. These are the really old ones here from, is it Grafton? Yeah, I suppose they're not that old, and they're lovely editions. And an awful lot of Michael Moorcock books would be like that. That's art by Michael Whelan. There you go. One of my preferred ways how Stormbringer is drawn is like the leaf form Celtic sword, a great sword, if you like, full of black sort of red runes. So I'm not too sure the order that they're in anymore. Let me see. Elric, is it just Elric of Melnibone? Elric of Melnibone. Or Melnibone is what I've been thinking about. I've often wondered. I think is the first one. But you get these editions here, which are the Tales of the Eternal Champion, and they're well collected by now. And Michael Moorcock's quite thick. He's been writing on a fair bit. I haven't read much of him in a long time, but he's a fundamental of my youth, if you see what I mean. But I think there's about, in terms of these collections, I think there's 14 volumes. We have the Eternal Champion series, if you like. I've got a couple of the really old hardback ones here that kind of these became. But we have Von Beck, the Eternal Champion, Hawkmoon, Coram is the Irish one, for anyone interested, Sailing You to Utopia, Nomad of the Time Streams, Dancers at the End of Time, which is, I think, is often voted in the top 100 sci-fi of all time. Elric of Melnibone, The New Nature of the Catastrophe, Prince with the Silver Hand. I think that's Coram again, isn't it? Legends from the End of Time, Stormbringer, Earl Albic, and Count Brass, also aware of it. So there's more than one volume of these. And I think I just picked this one up to fill in the gaps of my sort of single novels. But it's often a wee bit confusing whenever you read them to try and figure out which one comes first, I suppose. And you don't have to read them that way. There we go. Let's get you guys back in there. Elric, yes, indeed. There we go. I remember being on holiday in Mallorca when I was a teenager. I had a bad motorcycle accident and skinned myself alive and had 200 pieces of gravel picked out of me. Yeah, I remember looking like the mummy for the next two weeks, wrapped up in bandages on this lovely sort of Balearic island, and playing an Elric pinball machine that I'd never seen. Just, oh wow, they got Elric pinball machines over here. Fantastic. So Stormbringer, yeah, if only it did. Yeah, the Eternal Champion, it can be a bit eternal. It can go on. The Singing Citadel. There we go. And the Dreaming City. The Eternal City, is it not the Eternal City? Tanalorn within all those Elric books is quite interesting. There's a whole pile more stuff there, guys, by the way, within that. I was only just sort of listing off that was this series. There you go. There's all the works by Moorcock, and it's just an outrageous big list. He's very, very prolific. The thing that I had, by the way, bear with me a wee second. Just to bring this up, we're going to have a wee look at something. Not tonight because we don't have time, but I'll get. Hopefully, maybe somebody will remind me about this. Let's see. Bear with me one wee second. I have it. Yes. Now, quite possibly next week, actually. What I happen to have here is a very interesting article called Epic Poo. And it's by Michael Moorcock. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. If anybody wants to go ahead and look, I found it somewhere on the, there we go, Epic Poo is what it's called, seriously. And I'd like to have a wee sort of chat about it at some point, maybe have a wee read through. So we don't have a time to look at it tonight. I'll give you the author's note on it, just to let you know, and we'll have a look at this next time, hopefully. Epic Poo was originally published as an essay by the BSFA, revised for its inclusion in the 1989 book Wizardry and Wild Romance, a study of epic fantasy, and slightly revised again for this publication. Is written long before the publication of much-deserved success of Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy, which, in my view, merits all the optimism I have expressed here. The essay did not attempt to deal with all fantasy, such as Alice in Wonderland or other children's fantasy, but only epic fantasy from its origins in romance poetry to the present day. So it's all to do with Lord of the Rings a fair bit. Why is the Rings being widely read today? This kind of thing. Let me see. Yeah, it's quite a lengthy article, but it's got lots of quotes and quotations, etc. in it. I just thought it'd be a very interesting little talking point, especially with what we're seeing it's being done to Tolkien's work, possibly by Amazon, who want to make it a sort of very, I don't know, I suppose all-inclusive, all singing, all dancing thing to everybody in the world, rather than demonstrate, I suppose what Tolkien created. But there we go. So the last wee thing just for tonight, folks, and I'm going to wrap up in a wee second because, as I said, save the throat, and I have an very important chapter of Dune to get to, really important one. I think it's going to be interesting on Sunday, so I have to be able to have a wee chat about it. Is one other thing I picked up on Twitter this week, and I said I don't really comment on much things on Twitter, but I do have a wee nosy now and then. Brian Herbert, see what you think about this. We're having a wee chat about Frank Herbert, his son Brian Herbert, and I suppose the relationship of father-son and what the son has done with the father's property. We also have J.R.R. Tolkien and his son Christopher, who's been heavily involved with the Lord of the Rings world, if you like, the mythopoeia around it, and just how both men have gone about working with their fathers, with their respective fathers' properties, and how that work has been perceived by scholars, academics, etc., and the public, critics even, if you like. So it was just an interesting little thing. Brian Herbert apparently has put on Twitter that he is writing to the SFWA in relation to his father. Let me have a wee look. Gosh. So the SFWA is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. And these people are also responsible for the Nebula Awards. It's kind of an in-house thing. I suppose the Hugos and the Nebulas haven't been too... They've been seen as a bit dodgy, a bit old school, a bit, lately. And so, simply put, Brian Herbert has written to them, so he says anyway, that he wants Frank Herbert to be considered a Grandmaster, one of their Grandmasters, and he would like Frank to join the likes. And the names that he mentioned were, of course, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and included Ray Bradbury there as well. Also, apparently, Grandmasters. So I'm assuming, is that like a Nebula Award for being a Grandmaster of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, Grandmasters? So apparently the real problem here is why we all think, oh yeah, Frank's a pretty famous, pretty well known, a master of science fiction. Yeah, why not? Maybe a Grandmaster, who knows? I just think it's kind of funny, and I don't know what you think about it, but apparently the qualifiers to become a Grandmaster of science fiction are that you've got to be alive. So it's not that Brian is writing, could we give him an honorary one or a sort of posthumous consideration? Brian would like the SFWA to change their rules so that they can make Frank Herbert a Grandmaster. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, I suppose, is that 3 out of those 4 names, Frank Herbert, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and Robert Heinlein, in terms of science fiction history books, etc. Bear with me. Oh, we've got a few, but quite a good book for the discerning reader, and I think it's well done. With David Wengrove is Brian W. Aldiss's Trillion Year Spree. This is a pretty good book, I think. If you want to get a good sense of science fiction, all about it, it's got Brian Aldiss's stamp on it, so he thinks certain things, But it's very much in terms of Brian Aldiss commenting. It's his idea that there was a science fiction super league of authors, that this super league was based around their book sales, not their magazine sales, or household names, if you like. So Frank Herbert, Asimov, Clarke, and Heinlein have always been the big four for a long time. And then we've had a few sort of newspaper journalists and a couple of sci-fi academics wanting to shift their books, who've come down quite hard on these guys and suggested that they've invented science fiction history rather than writing about it. But simply put, to mark his own stamp, he winged Frank Herbert out of that list. So the big four are now called the big three. You can, I suppose, check it out on Wikipedia if you like. And I've just thought more surprising that Brian Herbert wouldn't want to correct that. So a Grandmaster title up for Frank, posthumously possibly, maybe the need to change the science fiction, the SFWA's rules. So again, just a wee bit of food for thought. what do we think about these kind of things, But listen, folks, as I said, excuse me, we've actually got quite a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight, and I'm really sorry. I'm going to hit it on the head here because it's just gone 10, and as I said, my throat has been pretty this week, and we're probably going to do a good 3 hours at least on Sunday. So thank you very much for joining in tonight. And as I said, we've got a few wee things for you for the next Sci-Fi Friday. Hopefully we can run a bit longer. But the Dune Book Club is taking a wee bit of a demand with these big chapters. So thank you very much for joining us, folks. And by the way, if you have any wee questions and all, if we don't get to anything this week, I'm going to start sort of setting this up a wee bit that we have regular posts on when we'll be online, and I even plan ahead a wee bit. So if you have any questions for next week or next time, have a wee think about them, etc. And I'm always happy to explore any science fiction topics, fantasy, horror, genre, mythology, you name it, I have a look at it. So thanks very much for joining me tonight on this wee short episode, just to preserve the throat for Sunday. And if anybody wants to join us for the Dune Book Club here on the station, we'll be on Sunday at 9 p.m. GMT +1. So thanks very much, folks. College and Campbell say night all. Bojack says good night all. Good night, folks. Take care of yourselves no matter where you are. Look after yourselves and your loved ones. All the best. Good night. Bye-bye. Do 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 ba 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 ba.